Is there a difference with this one, or is there a similarity, I should say really, with maybe Odelay, in that this was meant to be the real follow-up to Odelay, you did it the same way, the songs maybe weren't together as opposed to Mutations, which they were?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely is the follow-up to Odelay, and Mutations was, to me, that was just a vacation from our live show.
You started out playing folk songs. Do you still believe totally, or you still have a great belief in springing from tradition in terms of the music?
I do, yeah. I think it's important to have roots, you know. So that you can stray as far as you want. You can veer off in all kinds of different splintered directions, but you can still look back and know where you started from and know where the music started from, you know.
Yeah.
It's like getting to have some kind of map.
Because, like, you were in a position when you were very young to be very influenced by an awful lot of what was new wave or whatever at the time, living in LA with your parents or with your mother bringing in people who were kind of punky or whatever the word might be. And yet you seemed to kind of reject it and you went into the bedroom to find the old Mississippi John Hurt albums instead. Like, it was right there on your doorstep, but you went searching for something else.
Well, yeah, I mean, you couldn't really escape punk rock and that kind of sound in the late 70s. Early 80s, and I thought, I still think that up until about 82, there was still some really amazing music. Punk was transitioning and getting a little more experimental and incorporating things that we now, you know, elements of music we would call new wave, and then other people went off into more hip hop and experimented with that kind of thing. You know, the Talking Heads and Blondie were going off in that direction, and there was a lot of that. To me, that's such a time of possibility. And then by about 83, 84, you get the 80s sound, and the Miami Vice sound, the Michael Jackson Thriller sound. So I think it was that point where I felt like what we call the big 80s sound started to dominate, and it became less interesting.
Okay, well, one of the first things was the single Loser, which at this stage of the game, how much of a, is it an albatross in some ways because of what it's become, or is it just like, damn, this was a great song and now it's just, all the stuff around it has become so big, I have to almost dislike it, or certainly I have to not play too much emphasis on it, which I might have done if it had just been a song.
Yeah, I don't think about the song that much, you know. It's not a burden at all. I mean, to me, it's just another song that I do. Sure, there's other songs that I'm more excited about, that I can put more into when I'm performing, but I think it's a good song. It's a silly song. I didn't take it real serious, and I think that's something that people take from it when they hear it. They hear that it isn't, you know, it was just this free form, loose cannon. People wouldn't have been interested in it if it wasn't for Nirvana or Kurt Cobain, because the song existed for a couple of years before anybody really cared about it. And once the grunge thing took over and people all of a sudden got it, that it referred to that slightly. But by the time it became a hit, you know, people were walking around with T-shirts that said "Loser." That whole notion, it got hijacked by the media
and the ad companies and
the people and the culture, and they used it as a leverage to try to reach this young generation who they didn't know how to reach, you know. There was a great awkward moment in the early 90s, I remember, where the media and advertising people just seemed so out of touch with where people my age, where we were at and what we thought. We weren't going to be like another crop of individuals who would just carry on the, you know, what had been going on in the 80s. And I mean, now we've kind of come full circle. I think we're back in a time where commercialism and formula music is desired, and that's what people want. And so it swings back and forth.
Okay, do you think then, in some ways, that like by the time, like, okay, you brought out an album then with that, which was Mellow Gold, and then the main album comes out a couple of years later in '96, which is Odelay. Now, do you think in any way at all before Odelay that the way a lot of people would have seen Beck as a novelty act? Because of everything you've just said, that let's just say Loser was the soundtrack to the last two paragraphs you've just said, right? So if it was, then sorry, you wrote that soundtrack. So in that way, maybe you were out of touch by '96. He was a novelty.
Yeah, I don't blame him. I mean, there's different reasons why, too, because every time I was on TV or somebody turned a camera on me, you know, I come from a performance background. You know, when me and my brother were 15, 16, we were putting on performances where somebody would have a donkey head on and somebody else would be spray painting a plastic machine gun, and somebody else, you know, we're, you know, inspired by a lot of the Dada and Fluxus art things. And so we were, you know, as a teenager, I was involved in a lot of the downtown LA art happenings, and there was people building robots that shot fire, and Butthole Surfers shows were happening, and all this kind of music and art and craziness, this whole underground thing was happening then. So I was coming out of that, and like when they wanted me on Top of the Pops, I said, I don't really want to do anything like that, but it was really important to them. So I said, how about if we get a bunch of 80-year-old men? And to me, I thought it would be a performance. And they'd sent me footage of the show, and it's a bunch of young kids, over enthusiastic, hyped up, you know, exuding this youthful intensity. And I just thought it would be an interesting. There might be some interesting friction if you just put those face to face. So maybe some people got it, but I think most people took it as a joke. Either I was taking the piss out of the show, or I was just a joker. So there was humor in it, but there's something else going on that was kind of interesting. So I think I realized that it was just all taken out of context. Also, as far as the sound goes, that people thought it was a novelty sound, it was novel at the time, but what I was experimenting with, putting hip-hop beats with folk songs and Delta blues and sitars and synthesizers, and you know, this was the sound that I heard in my mind. Now it's become more of, you know, part of the general sound of the 90s. So maybe at the time it seemed a little awkward or strange or out of place. But I think by the time I did Odelay, it helped define it a little more so people could understand that it wasn't just... And even then, with Odelay, people would call it cut and paste, and this song's retro or whatever. There's all kinds of terms to cheapen it, you know. Make the music, you know, ghettoize the music. Just put it off to the side.
But hold on, I mean, like, if somebody says cut and paste, it is. And like, but it's totally cool. It's like, it's great cut, it's great paste. I mean...
Yeah, well...
A hybrid, if you want, I don't know, call it what you like.
But anything that's new is hybrid, isn't it? I mean, first time you heard Sgt. Pepper's, you know, it's the same thing. It's like, there's music from India going on, there's, you know, vaudevillian kind of piano tunes, and there's, and then there's circus music and all these cut and paste, you know. So I'm sure the first time somebody brought a timpani into an orchestra, that was a certain amount of cut and paste. So, you know, it's just creating a new sound and bringing different elements together. And what I've been working hard to do for years now is to explore that sound and work within it to make it glue together. So it's not like you see this composite of different pieces awkwardly stuck together. It becomes this whole new object, you know, this whole new thing.
Okay, well, but like when Odelay came out, all this, whatever you want to call it, worked brilliantly in terms of it was a commercial success and it was a huge critical success. Now, the two of those together, right, are two things that a lot of people out there making music would kill for.
Yeah.
And you got the two of them. In fact, maybe you got too much. You got Grammy Awards out of it. You got, like, one of the most praised albums of the 90s anywhere in the world. Totally new music. This guy's the first innovative, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Are you happy with that? Do you rest easy at night with the responsibility that's now being placed on your shoulders?
I'm the type of person who needs to continue and evolve, and that's nice, but that's happening over here. I'm really interested in and intently working on something else and trying to see if I can do this other thing. It was nice. As far as success, it was successful, but we worked hard for that success. I mean, I think that album would have done a fraction as well as if we hadn't toured for 2.5 years and we did everything, you know. And that was mostly to keep the record company happy and so that I could, you know, pay my band, things like that. But it was the, you know, having support from writers and critics definitely helped. I mean,
well, then what happened a few days ago? Did you forget to pay the band?
No. Yeah, we lost a few of our band members. Well, you can't blame my guitar player, Smokey Hormel, who's been with me for a while. Tom Waits has been borrowing him for the last year or so, so he's gonna stay with Tom, which I can't blame him. You know, Tom Waits is, you know, can say, you know. So, and he was born to play with Tom. And my drummer, Joey, he's been with me for years now, I think over 7 years. Has been playing with REM for the last year, and you know, so
you've lost
they're
them
moving on
to Tom Waits and REM.
I know, you know, we're a farm, we're a farm for the
other acts,
for the other bands, yeah.
Really? So what's going to happen? I mean, is it auditions now for new members? I mean, is it auditions now for new friends? 7 years.
I know.
That's not easy.
I know. Well, in music years, that's decades. So.
Sure is. The Beatles lasted from 63 to 70. That's 7 years.
I know, exactly.
Seems like 50 years.
Yeah, it is.
So what are you going to do? I mean, like, is it difficult if you got to hire new friends, in inverted commas? That's not easy.
Yeah, it's not nice, because you can't replace the time that you developed together and you played every night together and you created a common language.
Your brother and I think like father or maybe grandfather, they were all involved in sort of doing, I don't know what you might call it, art collage stuff. There was one of the famous one of cigarette butts and newspaper ads and cutting the head off a horse, and when you came home from school the whole thing had changed or whatever. Yeah. What they were doing in art, I'm sure this is a question you've been asked loads of times, but here goes. Did you learn in some way from that that's what you can do with music too? Let's not use the phrase cut and paste here.
I don't think directly. It's not like I got a light bulb over my head and said, yeah, oh, you know, that's the way to go. I think, if anything, you know, my grandfather was involved with the Fluxus art movement, and
that's here in New York in the 60s, is it?
Mostly in Europe, and in here he was sort of peripheral in the Warhol scene and happenings and performance art and all these things. I think if anything, that kind of art, you know, predicated our cultural leanings and how we see the world in this time. It was just 30 years early.
Yeah.
So with or without that in my direct family, I'm sure that's part of, you know, that's part of the aesthetic in this time. So, but definitely affected, you know, in other ways. How I think. I mean, it's not something I'm really conscious of. It's just, you know, it wasn't like my grandfather's around saying, hey, you know, here's this Joseph Beuys book and study it and then go out and do something. It was really more of, like it was, you know, just in the whole area. And my grandfather wasn't around a lot growing up. This was, I think myself and my brother would just, is what we were into. We weren't into sports, and we didn't, you know, and where we grew up, we were kind of in an island socially. We didn't have a lot of friends, and we're kind of you know, in this little bubble. So we just, those were the things that we were into. Those are the things that excited us. You know, there were things, you know, like getting taken to Fellini movies when we were 10. And
Yeah.
These things are definitely going to color how you see the world.
Yeah. But then the combination of both those then, I mean, if the background, we could say, is artistic and bohemian, I mean, you know, thus Odelay maybe, or thus, you know, the current album. I mean, there is something there that's...
Definitely. Yeah, it's a whole, you know. But, you know, on the other hand, I know tons of kids who grew up with parents who were weird or artists or hip, and they come running away from the home and go to college and become lawyers, and
they were
very rigid. I think
Gordon
that's
Gekko
more
on
common.
Wall Street.
I think it's more common. I mean, this stuff wasn't pushed on us, you know, it was just kind of been around.
If Odelay, or from Odelay to Midnite Vultures, in the middle was Mutations, is it possible then that Mutations was more about songwriting than song construction?
Oh, definitely, yeah. That was one of the main points. That I had these songs sitting around, but also, like we were saying, people said, oh, he's cut and paste and this and that, and I just, that's a technique, it's a device, it's not necessarily me, you know. I can, there's still songs underneath all this, all the noises and business, and, you know, so doing that record, and also I knew a lot of people were jumping on the wagon of getting into that, and it sort of, in an ingenuine way. I mean, they would take a straight pop song, but they would just add one sample or one loop to dress it up, you know? It's like getting stonewashed pants.
Yeah.
Pre-aged, you know? This is kind of, I was seeing a lot of that, you know? People were taking elements of that style, which all comes from hip-hop, and you know, trying it on like it's a coat, and you know what I mean? Yeah. So I wanted to do a record where it didn't rely on that, didn't rely on the technology or the samples or anything like that, just to say, you know, the point is, this isn't the only way to make music now. You know, that's how trends are born. Everyone thinks, okay, this is the way we do it now. Yeah. It's not about that. It's finding about what way is natural for you, what create your music, how it's comfortable and natural, and what makes sense for the songs. You know, some of the songs off Mutations didn't make sense to put a break beat under it, or arpeggiated synthesizer, or, you know what I mean? So.
And was the last bit of that album really being recorded while the Radiohead producer Nigel Godrich was waiting to get into his car and go to the airport?
Totally, completely, yeah.
It was a real 14-day thing. Sorry lads, 14 days are up, we're finished.
I was doing a vocal the last song. He said, my car's here.
Yeah.
You guys better finish this one yourselves.